full playlist is in the description box. Spread the word. Boxing beats and rhymes. Let's do this. The showdown. Leonard versus Hearns. Caesar's Palace. 16th of September, 1981. As the entourages of victor and vanquished spilled into the ring, the 23,618 high rollers, celebrities, and boxing aficionados began to file out of the stadium in the direction of the casino's gaming tables. The sky lit up with a gaudy, expensive fireworks display that Caesar's Palace had commissioned for the occasion. The fight, advertised as the showdown, had more than lived up to its billing for almost 14 rounds of non-stop action. It had been a thrilling war, give and take, ebb and flow, and when it was over, only one man was left standing. Had the two fought, as they almost did in Providence back in 1978, remember Leonard would have made $100,000 and Hearns $12,500. 3 years later, their respective guarantees were $8 million and $5.1 million, and each would earn millions more against what turned out to be a $36 million gross in terms of profit. Although Hearns, by 1980, didn't have the same profile as Leonard, he had attracted the attention of boxing insiders. After knocking out Cuevas, Tommy posed as a hitman wearing a zoot suit and a Tommy gun tucked under his arm. He was featured on the cover of the Ring magazine. It was Hearns in 1980 who was the reigning fighter of the year. When we finally made our deal with the Hearns camp, we did things the way I'd always felt a big fight should be done, said Mike Trainer, who represents Sugar Ray Leonard. We did all our negotiating with Hearns representatives and with Caesar's Palace first. Then we went out and hired somebody to act as the promoter. Officially, the promotion was staged by a four-way consortium of Dan Doyle, Shelley Finkel, along with husband and wife team Dan and Kathy Duva, who headed up main events. Their prior experience had for the most part come in the promotion of small club fights in New Jersey. Shelley had kind of been the intermediary, said Trainer. He helped work things out with Hearns' people, and he was close to the Duvas. We basically hired them to put on the promotion, and it pretty much put main events on the map. Doyle, as a reward for his loyalty and past services, was listed as a co-promoter, but said the erstwhile basketball coach, "My real job was to raise the capital for the fight and handle the New England pay-per-view sale. Dan, Kathy, Shelley handled a variety of tasks. They did a terrific job. Bob Aaron was later brought on a board to help with the overseas markets and to coordinate the pay-per-view distribution. Once the match was made, Caesars knew that Leonard Hearns would be the biggest boxing event it had ever hosted. Although both participants had fought at the casino before, it had been within the cozy confines of the tin-walled sports pavilion. For this fight, the hotel constructed a temporary stadium that rose up from what was normally a parking lot. Immediately after the fight, it would be dismantled to make way for the Caesars Palace for the Caesars Grand Prix. But for this one-time use, capacity would be nearly 24,000. The top ticket price was set at $500. With hotel rooms at the host casino jammed with high-rolling customers, most of the press contingent was relegated to the Marina, a fly-by-night motel up the Strip that would eventually be bulldozed to make room for the present-day MGM Grand. "How bad is the Marina?" a scribe grumbled. "When I checked in, a bellhop asked me if I knew where he could find any girls." Although I realized it at the time, the showdown was briefly imperiled 3 weeks before the fight at Leonard's training camp in Phoenix. One of his sparring partners, a then unbeaten young Californian middleweight named Odell Hadley, caught Sugar Ray with an errant elbow beneath the left eye. Although he wasn't cut, the shiner was bad. Although it was initially feared that a postponement might be necessary, after a few days the swelling subsided. Members of the training camp were sworn to secrecy, and Leonard resumed his preparations. An even more serious training injury occurred in the other camp. but it wasn't to Hearns. In a sparring session less than 10 days before the fight, the hitman served notice that he was getting his chance, that he was getting his game face on, when he broke Marlon Starling's jaw. Starling, who would later become a two-time welterweight champion, was to have headlined the live card accompanying the closed-circuit telecast at the Hartford Civic Center. Instead of replacing his bout, local promoters advertised that they would show video clips of the sparring session in which Hearns injured Starling. Each competitor, in fact, prepped for the showdown against a sparring partner named Odell. Hearns was also sparring with Odell Leonard, whose promoters around the country had been pitching as a cousin of the Olympic champion. That Odell, who would fight Marvin Hagler's brother, Robbie Sims, on the Boston Garden live show on the 16th of September, made no attempt to correct the alleged family ties. But once he went over the hill and joined the enemy, the Leonard camp quickly outed him. "His name is Odell Davis, and he's from North Carolina," said Janks Morton. "He changed his name after the '76 Olympics." "He's not my cousin," said Roger Leonard. "If he was my cousin, do you think he'd be helping the other guy who's going to fight my brother?" In the first 6 months of 1981, Hagler had made the first two defenses of his middleweight crown on his home turf, facing Fulgencio Oblemias in January before meeting Vito Antuofermo in a June rematch. Oblemias was 30-0 and rated the #1 challenger by the WBA. His first 27 fights had for the most part taken place in his homeland and in Mexico, while his last 3, all against nondescript opposition, had taken place in Italy. That Hagler would approach his championship reign with the same dedication he had in the years when he was a hungry outsider was evident the first time we visited him in Provincetown before the Oblemias fight. All but shuttered down for the season, the sprawling Princetown Inn was a ghostly mansion in January. Hagler rose each morning to run across the secluded dunes at the tip of Cape Cod, emerged from his room once a day for sparring, and spent the rest of his day in seclusion, staring out at the bleak winter landscape. As a boy in Newark, Hagler had kept pigeons in a rooftop coop. In Provincetown, he had developed an affinity for the ubiquitous seagulls, some of whom he had given names. In training, Hagler wore shirts and caps emblazoned with an ominous-sounding, if bizarrely ungrammatical slogan, "Destruction and Destroy." Sometimes Goody and Pat Petronelli would drop by for a chat, and he would occasionally rouse one of his sparring partners for a walk on the dunes. But it isn't a stretch to say that Hagler spent 20 hours of each day alone, much of that thinking about his next opponent, in this case Oblemias. Considering his dearth of high-level experience, Oblemias performed credibly enough. He didn't win a single round and was down twice before Octavio Mayran stepped in and stopped the fight 20 seconds into the 8th round. Oblemias had been a mandatory challenger. In his next defense, Hagler was determined to erase what he considered the lone remaining blot on his record. He had avenged the Philadelphia decisions with Watts and Monroe by knocking out both men. He had removed any lingering doubt over the Seals draw with a first-round knockout in their third meeting. Now it was time to prove to the world that the Antuofermo draw had been a miscarriage of justice. Antuofermo's proclivity for being cut was legendary. He had recently undergone a new form of surgery that promised to alleviate the condition. Doctors had gone beneath the tender skin above his eyebrows to shave down the bone, a procedure it was believed would better allow him to withstand punches without bursting open. "I guess," a cornerman would say later, "the operation didn't take. Vito did not have a chance in this one." Hagler was all over him from the opening bell onwards. Antuofermo's face began to sprout leaks in the first round. A deep cut above his left eye had turned his face into a mask of gore. But Vito the Mosquito pressed bravely onwards. Hagler dropped him in the third when Vito emerged from his stool to answer the bell for the 5th. He was followed into the ring by a towel from his corner. Marvin's reign as middleweight champion was off to a flying start, but he would never play the old Causeway Street arena again. The second Antwerp fight turned out to be Hagler's last in the Boston Garden.